Hi guys, I'm Tiare Gattimora. This is my personal YouTube channel, and today I wanna tell you guys about how I feel about an issue that I think is amongst the most important political issues of our time, and that is nuclear energy. And it is that important because whether you support nuclear energy or not, I think really is the result of what kind of political project you want, right? And I want one that is certainly about rationality and abundance and basically, seizing all that we as humans are able to create for all. But put a pin in that because I'm gonna get to that towards the end of the video. Before I say anything else, I want to say this is my opinion and it doesn't necessarily reflect the stance of any organization that I collaborate with. This is my personal opinion. And I think it's actually pretty good that there can be organizations where disagreement is allowed. Should be needless to say, right? But yeah, I think that's a good thing. And since we're on organizations that I'm collaborating with, today I want to focus on the work of Leigh Phillips. And specifically, I want to read you guys some articles in Jacobin magazine, which I am currently collaborating with, and I will leave my latest video down below in the description, and I hope you guys check it out. I hope you guys follow Jacobin because it's truly one of my favorite media, especially when it comes to left politics and to finding out people that I believe I can actually trust. Because here's the thing. I want to focus on reading through these articles today, partly because I'm really not great at science, sadly, because I have a lot of respect for it. I definitely lean atheist, and I certainly think that science is absolutely key to a politics that respects Enlightenment thought, and a politics that is Marxist and that is has respect for the, if you will, grand narratives I think are very much needed for a left that has any chance of success. And so, yeah, basically I am no science expert and I don't claim to be, but I do think I'm good at identifying who we can trust in terms of whose opinion is important and blends together a political ideal, a political project that is worthy and deserves our focus with a scientific understanding of realities, because there is such a thing as those realities that need to be reckoned with, and that is the absolute need for nuclear energy if we want any sort of working left project. So, after this preamble, I am going to get started with For and Against Climate Progress in the Atomic Garden by Leigh Phillips. It's his review of Nuclear is Not the Solution, The Folly of Atomic Power in the Age of Climate Change by M.V. Ramana, like I was introducing in Jacobin. And I will put all of these links down below, and I very much recommend you guys read through these articles. So, some concepts which for science, idiots like myself might be useful. First of all, there is no such thing as perfect safety for anything. The dose is what makes the poison, and hazard is the potential to cause harm. That hazard multiplied by the level of exposure equals the risk of that harm actually happening. And everything, even crossing the street and drinking a cup of coffee, is inherently hazardous. Okay, so let's bear that in mind as we go through this. So, starting with the very big one, Chernobyl, right? This gets brought up all the time when opposing nuclear energy. So I'm gonna read, okay? The Chernobyl Tissue Bank, CTB, housed at the US National Cancer Institute with the support of the Ukrainian government, the EU, and the World Health Organization, is a repository of biological material from thousands of people who were exposed as children to radioactive fallout during the 1986 Chernobyl nuclear disaster. Over the decades, more than 36 studies have been produced using the samples and data from the CTB. These studies, along with other research not reliant on the CTB, have consistently found no evidence for an increase in cancers other than thyroid cancer among those who were children at the time of exposure, even for those living closest to the power station. And contra Ramana's claim, as Thomas notes in a paper summarizing the work of the tissue bank, over the following 25 years, there were 15 more deaths from thyroid cancer than would otherwise be expected. The total lifetime excess is predicted to be 60. And thyroid cancer incidence falls back to normal in anyone born after the radiation had dissipated. And whilst it's tragic, indeed, what happened at Chernobyl, I think just, reading through this data kind of really shows that actually there have been much worse disasters in terms of, health consequences, even. So I don't know, I wanted to put this into perspective, as well as put what a radiation dose is into perspective, right? The average annual dose of ionizing radiation experienced by a nuclear plant worker is only slightly higher than that of an airline passenger taking a transatlantic journey from New York to London and back, because the passenger is closer to space, home to all sorts of ionizing radiation, than on the ground. But neither pose a significant health risk. So let's put this ignorant radiophobia to bed. It's not radiation that's the problem, it's what kind and what amount. Exactly, right? So this, before I read about nuclear energy, this quite surprised me, because I had no idea that even getting on a plane would imply being exposed. And I was, I'm talking from the standpoint of a scared person, but actually reading through this just makes you realize, no, you can actually work at a nuclear energy plant and you're not that much worse off than just taking flights. So that's extremely interesting. And also, another thing to put into perspective, the waste question. Most waste is actually just spent fuel, much of which can be recycled to produce new fuel, reducing the volume of high-level waste, HLW, by about 85%. France, China, Russia, and Japan already do this. The technique is called plutonium-uranium reduction extraction, PUREX. It removes the byproducts of the spent fuel from uranium and plutonium, which can then be reused as new fuel. Again, something else I had no idea about. Another technique, pyroprocessing, does not isolate pure plutonium. Better yet, the waste remaining after the process declines to the radioactivity level of uranium mineral ore after just 300 years. Okay? And another thing to consider that sort of anti-nuclear activists will definitely not tell you is that the toxicity of other industrial waste is also a problem. It's not like other, types of energy production don't have this issue at all. Fundamentally it looks like there appear to be ways to, deal with the question of waste. And I find it really, delusional and just alarmist to basically make this like this unsurmountable problem related to nuclear, when actually, there are sort of techniques, and there are, basically manners in which the problem of the waste literally diminishes, right? Then, the question of stability, okay? This is more of a problem that is ignored, that the lack of nuclear energy brings, and that nuclear energy is a solution for, right? Stable energy. Very much needed if we're gonna want, a national healthcare service that actually works. So, I'm gonna keep reading. An electric grid cannot maintain reliability with variable and intermittent energy, VRE, sources like wind and solar alone. We need consistent power to run essential services like ventilators and incubators without waiting for the sun to shine or the wind to blow. While batteries can store energy, they cannot provide long-duration storage for periods when neither wind nor solar energy is available for weeks on end. And so, to ensure grid reliability, we need firm resources, those that are available whenever needed, to complement VRE. And basically, in many places in the world, nuclear power remains a necessary firm energy option to complement VRE, right? These other options are not available all the time everywhere on the planet, and put a pin in that, but basically we are gonna need stable energy sources again if we want to build a certain type of political project, and you'll see where I'm getting at later. But let's get to examples. So, expanding its fleet in the late 1970s, France decarbonized most of its grid through a public sector nuclear build-out for about the equivalent of 100 billion by the early 1980s. Right next door, Germany's Energiewende, no idea if I said that right, transition to wind, solar, and biomass has cost more than 500 billion, yet its grid is roughly 6 times more carbon intensive than its neighbors, and its electricity prices are about a third higher. Germany's high energy prices are bludgeoning its economy and even leading to deindustrialization. Put a pin in that also. We'll get to it later. Deindustrialization connected to this. Another question that is usually brought up is nuclear plant cost overruns and delays. And so, I'm gonna keep reading. Constant regulatory changes during construction, often driven by successful anti-nuclear campaigns and the appointment of activist allies to regulatory bodies, are a major factor. Long pauses following events like Chernobyl, 9/11, and Fukushima, as well as the effects of neoliberal energy sector liberalization, have also contributed. And this is Leigh Phillips' review of M.V. Ramana in Jacobin. But I'm going to continue with, again, Leigh Phillips and Matt Huber, also in Jacobin, as they write about Japanese theorists of degrowth communism. Don't get me started. Actually, do get me started. I'm gonna get into it. Kohei Saito. The title of this article is Kohei Saito's Start from Scratch Degrowth Communism. Let's see, shall we? So, the technologies we will indeed need. Let's talk about that for a minute. I'm gonna read. We should admit that Saito presents a vision of abundance in degrowth communism that no socialist should disagree with, defined most notably by a bounty of free time for individual and social development. But Saito downplays how central Marx's view was that such abundance was only possible on the basis of the massive revolutions in the productive forces developed by capitalism, most notably labor-saving technology developed by capitalism. Under capitalism, the gains from any labor-saving technology have almost exclusively been reserved for the owners of production. Fewer workers for the same output, thus lower costs and higher profits, rather than more holiday for the same number of workers for the same output. Under socialism, however, society could democratically choose whether for the same number of workers we want more production for the same hours or the same amount of production for fewer hours. But socialism still needs those labor-saving technologies to have been developed, right? And this is why, having gone through capitalism and industrialization, is in fact important. We will need those technologies. We cannot fall into this, anarcho-primitivist tendencies and also act like they're not anarcho-primitivists. They are, though. They are. And they are entirely counter to any actual idea of abundance and progress and reason. Let's get into the solutions of the degrowthers, shall we? So, when it comes to who in the global north is responsible, Saito is more liable to point at himself and other workers than capital. Got it. Our rich lifestyles would love to have a rich lifestyle, man. would be impossible without the plundered natural resources and exploited labor power of the global South. In terms of organizational power to deliver the transition we need, Saito also looks far afield from Japan toward global South peasant organizations like Via Campesina and campaigns for food sovereignty. The chapter reads like a laundry list of buzzwords of the largely ineffectual left around the turn of the millennium. Commons, autonomous zones, mutual aid, and horizontal solidarity. The urbanized utopia of small-scale gardens, which recent research has shown to be 6 times more carbon intensive than conventional agriculture, mutual aid and public housing with solar panels surely sounds good to Saito's likely readership. Cosmopolitan, professional, managerial class urbanites. Yet, strikingly absent from this chapter, and indeed Saito's recent 2 volumes, is any mention or role for what is the core agent of Marxist politics, the working class. Yeah, not looking good, is it? But highly predictable. What is to be prioritized instead, right? If these, ideas he's put together are not it, then what, again, coming back to what I was getting at in the beginning, what should a desirable left political project be based on? So I'm going to keep reading. It is science and technology shackled to egalitarianism, or as mid-century Marxist Hall Draper put it, Prometheus plus Spartacus, that allows us to overcome those limits. Friedrich Engels famously critiqued Malthus in 1844 for that one element that latter had forgotten to consider. Science, whose progress is as unlimited and at least as rapid as that of population, right? Because the problem isn't technology. And I want to make a differentiation here. I am a profound opponent of technocracy, right? Which is, this end of history political approach, which is very much about managing an already decided economic system that has material conditions that are under no real contestation. And therefore, what can be done is technocratically manage it. And for this kind of, approach, people's needs and, desires and political activity is just, deplorable, one might say. And just annoying and pointless, because if all questions have been settled, right, and you just gotta get a good manager, then why are these annoying people just, wanting history to return? And it's profoundly anti-humanist, and you'll never find me defending technocracy, but you will find me defending technology, which can be sometimes very much fetishized by technocrats and their ilk, but technology that is to do with progress, that is to do with improving our standards of living and making our lives more abundant, more rational, that is connected to these ideas of, reason and progress and science that are tied back to the Enlightenment, I think that is something good. The question is, whose hands is it on? Something the working class needs to see. Is it something that needs to be under democratic control? And I just, again, no, I don't want anarcho-primitivism. I don't want nature to control us. I don't want to bend to it. I want it to bend to us. Just by us, I don't mean like 5 capitalists that are compelled to make more and more and more money and hoard it. I mean to us as humankind. Just a little thing, just humankind. How about we put that at the center again? Which takes me to, and I'm gonna read again, who is to be prioritized. While the working class as a whole mass form the basis for a mass environmental politics, we also need a targeted strategy that acknowledges climate change, in particular enrolls a specific sector of workers Sato says almost nothing about. A group of workers with an interest in considerable power over and deep knowledge about the very energy, extractive, transport, building, infrastructural, and agricultural sectors that need to be transformed. That is, the industrial workers who build, maintain, and operate them. Right? Literally, the people that are being ignored are actually the people who need to be at the center of this, which is pretty ironic. And I want to couple this with another point made by Leigh Phillips in Jacobin. This article is called Planet of the Anti-Humanist. It critiques Michael Moore's documentary, Planet of the Humans. And Phillips says, a Green New Deal that puts nuclear power and synthetic hydrocarbons at the heart of an all-of-the-above approach, including solar, wind, enhanced geothermal, wave tidal hydrogen, and CCS, carbon capture and storage, represents the sort of economic stimulus that deindustrialized communities can understand as delivering genuine transformation. It could secure a future for both the planet and the political left. Exactly, because going back to the industrialization, what a great way to reindustrialize our countries, to, going back to a humanist project that puts, again, our abundance, our a system that rationally, is rationally democratic rather than obscenely unequal. A system that allows for all of us to enjoy the technological advancements that all of us have contributed to, right? I think that can only be achieved through a use of nuclear energy. Not only nuclear energy, but it doesn't look like we can do without if we want to be ambitious. To me, this is what it comes down to, ambition. And to go back to what I said in the beginning, I think this is such an important question because it really depends on what is a left political project to you. Again, if it is not to go back to, this primitive-like idea of, we work for the earth and we should actually just do whatever is best for the planet because we, at the end of the day, are, this virus on the earth and we are just ruining it, then that's just an anti-humanist project. To go back to anti-humanism, this is one of the shapes that it takes, which very much goes well with technocracy, by the way. Isn't that ironic sometimes? But yeah, basically this is an anti-humanist project that is not centered on us. In contrast, a project that does center on our, prosperity, again, for all, not for the random 5 of us, on our prosperity, on democratic choice, of direction and of distribution, on, the flourishing of us, human flourishing, which has very much to do with the, technologies in our lives that make it so that we don't have to be so obsessed about survival that we can't, again, flourish and go beyond just surviving, because survival truly is not enough, and that is at the core of my political project. Then, that kind of ideal, that kind of goal can only be achieved with firm, stable energy. It can only be achieved through that. And I mean, an example as obvious as a national, as a public healthcare system. If we want it to work well, yeah, we are gonna need nuclear, right? It's not just that, but that's such a brilliant example, I think. And this project goes back to, again, putting us at the center and making the world work for us. And that does mean using the earth, and also not destroying it, but again, for our sake. And nuclear achieves both of those things. So I think nuclear is the humanist option, fundamentally. That is my conclusion, which again, I will say, comes from a perspective that does want to put us at the center. Having us at the center, I think, to me, yeah, goes back to Enlightenment ideals. Also because then it means that, it celebrates that we are an agentic subject that can go out in the world and operate on it, again, for our sake. And yeah, I just, find it so interesting that nuclear goes back to this, the question of nuclear goes back to this great question of our time, which is whether our politics are humanist, and, based on grand narratives that put us at the center and that believe in our capacity to operate on the world, again, to bend it to work for us, versus a politics that is about, basically giving up on us, putting the spotlight on whoever gets to be the victim that fits the most, and sometimes that is the earth, right? And sometimes that is populations that never went through a capitalist transformation, never industrialized, as if we can, just discard that, and all of the, again, technology and, just comfort, and again, ability to focus on flourishing rather than survival that it has brought, and that we must redistribute through a socialist project. Anyway, again, not good at science, but I think I know who to trust. Leigh Phillips is my, I would say honestly, favorite individual when it comes to reading, to finding out about nuclear energy. I think he's one of the most brilliant, the most trustworthy people out there. I very much recommend listening to him, reading his work, whether that's in, text form or in magazines like Jacobin. And yeah, I would love to know what you guys think. I would like to know if you guys think I made myself clear. And yeah, this is it for today. Let me know your thoughts. Subscribe and like this video to support me. And let's please keep the debate going about nuclear, because like I said, it's not just nuclear. It's about what are the priorities of our political projects. Thanks guys for listening to me. I'll be back very soon.